Can I just ask if we, because I think David was suggesting we do question two, then question three,
Yeah,
round and round, but I think you've done the whole lot in one, Kate.
I'm really sorry. Yeah, I was I was not looking at the numbers of the questions. So yes, I have. But as I say, you will get the document, so it'll be quite clear which answers with respect to which questions. So sorry about that. And I shut up now.
Yeah, I'm sure we can do a little bit of editing on that. As long as other people don't make the same mistake, I shall remain.
Sorry.
No, Kate, it's a wonderful story, and it's really good to hear what you had to say. Um, I feel I'm coming at this issue in a different way from other people. So I'm answering the question, running the CDAs. There's a bit of a backstory because I mentioned earlier on that I came from a cooperative political family. Um, when Woking Society merged with Royal Arsenal Cooperative Society, RSCS were affiliated to the Labour Party, and and also I was involved both in RSCS politics and with the Court Party, both in Woking and then eventually when I moved to London. When I arrived in Cardiff in 1969, there was a big culture shock. Um, and the cooperative movement just seemed rather dead and not something one would want to waste one's time trying to resuscitate. And it was stuff with establishment people of various descriptions. So when I was a student, I set up an organization called Cardiff Student Community Action. And that was about building a bridge between the university and the town and trying to understand our responsibility and role in relation to giving agency and voice and providing resources to local people for them to get organized. And after a year or so, that took the form of us setting up with the residents Adamsdown Community and Law Centre. And I worked there for about five years in total. But we were applying cooperative principles in the context of cooperative development with local people, with successful day centre and preschool playgroups being established and actually being run by local people. In 1975, because of my London connections, essentially my mother, who was chair of RSCS's political committee, I heard about an EC anti-poverty programme. What we then did was to bring together a group of 12 self-help groups in South Wales with resources that would enable people to, as in Adamsdown, have agency and voice in making decisions about their lives. And we had a decision in October of 75 and established South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Centre in 1976. So answering the first part of the second question, how was your agency sustained and funded? Well, we were funded by the European Commission in part, 50%, and the balance came from Home Office's Voluntary Services Unit. How long did it operate? Well, we operated from May of 1976 until early 1981. The last year of that, I basically worked unpaid, continuing working with people that I'd previously been working with in various local CDAs and unemployment centres. So I've explained how long did it operate, but I think the key point here is what the ripple effect was. What ripple effect did it have in terms of engaging a wider number of people in cooperative development? And I will touch on that in question three. How many people did South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Centre employ? There were 7 of us. But there was only one person involved in cooperative development, and that was myself. And I quickly had to find a means of working myself out of a job. because there was no way at a regional level we could actually sustain marketing and other specialist resource support for local people across the whole swathe of South Wales. It would just be an impossible task, covering an area from Monmouth to Llanelli. It would just, and the Tybee Valley, it was just too much to expect. So we were involved in looking at ways of making local resources accountable and available, which we did. But I'll touch on that when we get to question 3, Francois. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I thought that Alex wanted to have a word also, just at the same time as Kate, or
I'm happy if we want to do it in the original order. I'm happy to wait.
so I think next was John, right?
I can't remember.
Because now it's moved.
Okay,
so-
I'll come in next. One thing you didn't say, François, at the beginning was that we've already had a meeting like this last week, and we had various people on that, including me. And there was Jane Avery, Jim Brown, Chaz Ball, Jenny Lynn, I think. So you've already had some of the Welsh angle. So I'm not going to repeat what I said in that, because François has already had that from me. And it'll speed things up if I don't go over the same material again. Just a couple of points which I think I didn't mention at the last one, which have occurred to me since. One is about employment, which is my recollection is that for the first few years, it's a requirement that all recruits had worked in a co-op, possibly had worked in a worker co-op, I'm not sure, and lived locally. They could move in, but we didn't want people commuting because there was so much localism about the work we were doing. Unless you understood the place and were part of the place where you were working, you couldn't really do the job. And we held the line on both of those for a long time. And then the other thing to say about staffing is it did depend on funding. So when projects started coming along, some of them through ICOM, National ESF projects, there was a lot of them. Quite a few of them were transnational projects. Is that the right term? I think it is. We would employ somebody for a year or two for that project. So the numbers went. The core staffing was about three people, but sometimes it was double that or more for people on fixed terms to do with projects and so on. And all our money, well, I've already said this last time. It was county council money. The parts of one of the 7 metropolitan counties that were taking a very anti-Tory government local economic development line, mainly stimulated by the huge growth in unemployment and the need to deal with that, and deindustrialization in most of those conurbations where the Met counties were, not London, that's a bit different. And then our city council came in and started funding, but it took a long time because they were old Labour and they weren't very keen on all this stuff. They thought the county council were far too radical and adventurous and so on. And we had a very traditional Labour group of power brokers in Coventry who took a long time to come on board with any of this sort of stuff. I think that's enough from me for now.
John, do you mind repeating some of what you've actually said last time? Because it would certainly aid editing. From my point of view, because I'm going to.
Well, I can't exactly remember what I said last time, but it will have been about all the stuff to do with the county councils and the unemployment, the projects that were created to combat unemployment, the creation of economic development units, which hadn't existed in local authorities before that time. It was a new function. There was, what was it? Was it Section 137 of the Local Government Act or something like that? Is that right, Martin? He's nodding. Yeah. It's amazing what you can remember, isn't it? Which gave them, it was a sort of, you can do anything not mentioned anywhere else if you want to, in things that aren't covered already in the Act. If you really want to do them, and you can spend a bit of money on. I think there was a limit of so much. Was it a tuppenny rate or something like that you could spend on Section 1? And they funded all these projects through that. But I mean, that's a whole topic in itself, really. And then there was the stuff about the Tory government abolishing the Met counties and the battle that went on over that we were caught up in. And in fact, in the dissolution of the county councils, we got £250,000 to buy 2 buildings. One, an office building where we had our office. Another one was a workspace, a bit like Kate was talking about, that we rented out to co-ops, and then the income was part of the rental income was part of our operating income. So those are some of the things I covered last time, I think.
Thank you very much, John. So I think the next interviewee was Martin. So
Yeah.
if you have any answers to provide for...
Okay, I'm going to keep this short, and I need to warn you again, I haven't got a lot of time. Half an hour tops, I would say. So section 2, running CDAs, how is your agency sustained and funded? Well, like most of the others we've just been hearing, mostly by local councils. Probably 80% of its funding came from local authorities in Oxfordshire, about 15% from European Social Fund, and about 5% from kind of contributions and levies from local co-ops and contributions from things like the Trades Council and individual supporters, I would say. How long did it operate? Well, it got going in 1986, sort of mid-1986. So from the point of view of a lot of what we've been talking about, quite late, but the political context in Oxfordshire is far more right-wing than what you've just been hearing from others. I mean, nearly all our funding came from Tory councils, probably 80%, 75 or 80% came from Tory councils. They weren't averse to co-ops, but they were averse to the idea that they were a sort of left-wing alternative to what they saw as a kind of, they were sort of socially liberal conservatives who were kind of interested in the idea of people taking control of their own lives and pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. And they weren't anti-co-op, far from it. But they didn't get going till 1986, as I said. The CDA in Oxfordshire ran till 2004, but I would say from about the late 1990s, say the start of the Blair government, 97 or so, it became essentially a training organisation rather than a co-op development organisation. And it wound up in 2004, and it transferred its engagements, as they say, to Co-op Futures, which was based, or still is based, in Gloucester, and is still operating and still operates in Oxfordshire and is doing quite a good job, I'd say. How many people did it employ? Basically about 2. It varied a bit because it depended on ESF funding, and it depended a bit whether you counted people who were kind of contractors to deliver particular services and this kind of thing. But, you know, not unlike what John was talking about a few minutes ago, small, very small core, and a few other people who were, as I say, short-term contracts or contractors or whatever. That's probably it on question 2.
Can I just do a footnote to what Martin said? I think Co-op Futures has given up its Gloucester office and they all operate from home now.
Okay, is it me next? Okay, so as I said, I didn't work for SCDC, so I only interacted with it through my co-op. So my answers will be very brief. So just to say, it was sustained and funded for a long period. I think it was set up by one guy, Cairns Campbell, in 1977, and John Pearce, that some people will know or known of, was involved as well as the initial chair. It got a lot of funding from local authorities, and we had a 2-tier local authority system at that point, with regions and then city and town councils. And it was, co-ops were seen as part of Labour's answer to employability and generally creating work and training schemes and so on. So it got quite a lot of funding from that point of view. And in terms of how long did it operate, it suffered a huge blow when the regional tier of local government was abolished in the 1990s, and Also, I think it got support initially from the Scottish Development Agency, which is now morphed into Scottish Enterprise many years ago. But I think there was certainly some support, and I remember attending meetings with people from the SDA who were involved in that. It operated in fits and starts. It changed its name from Scottish Co-operative Development Committee to Scottish Co-operative Development Company to keep the same initials, and then it changed its name to Employee Ownership Scotland to focus on employee ownership as well as on cooperatives, but it kind of like dwindled down. I mean, I was working for the co-op group in Glasgow at the time, and EOS as it then was ended up with a desk in a corner of my office because they didn't have any funds of their own anymore. Hugh Donnelly was their sole employee, and eventually when we got the Scottish government committed to setting up a new CDA, Employee Ownership Scotland basically shut down at that point. So that would have been about 2007. We had some significant trade union involvement as well, particularly from the GMB in Scotland. How many people did it employ? At its height, I would reckon about a dozen. And as I say, at its finish, it just down to one. And that's all my answers.
Thank you very much, Martin. So now it's Alex's turn, right?
Yes. How was your agency sustained and funded? So in the beginning, it was funded with a direct grant from the one local authority area. We had 3 local authorities in the area. We had the Vale of Glamorgan, which was to the west of Cardiff. We had Cardiff City Council, and then we had South Glamorgan County Council. At that time, we could only get some money originally from the city. We did then later get some money from the county council, but we never got any money from the Vale of Glamorgan, although we covered their operating area anyway. We had sufficient indirect grants from those 3 local authorities to pay for 1 full-time person, and that's what we had for the first few years. But we did go up to 3 people from time to time when we had other grants in, so we had some European funds, and I think we had some urban funds as well. How long it operated? The original agency was set up, I'm just looking at my notes here, in 1979, with put together, the company structure was put together by a local Labour Party solicitor, was immensely complicated, having divided the membership into different categories and then allocating them positions on the board. So we had a partition board and a partitioned membership. And in order to make any changes to our constitutional arrangements, we needed supermajorities in each of those sectors. So after 5 years of trying to manage this completely unworkable split, when nobody could ever understand what was going on at annual general meetings, because you didn't get to vote on most things, you only got to vote on things that applied to your sector. We attempted to change the rules and get rid of all the stratifications, and unfortunately we couldn't get the majorities. We couldn't get the sufficient number of people to get the quorums to make the rule change. So the only solution was to form a brand new company and close the other one down. So unfortunately, the records for the first one, in terms of Companies House, etc., are gone. They never got digitized. So you'd have to go to Companies House and stand in a queue for a long time and pay £1 a page for copies. So I've never done that. So we set up the new organisation with a much simpler, but with exactly the same funding arrangements. And that carried on until about 2004. But it struggled financially because of the Wales Co-op Centre. The Wales Co-op Centre, being a pan-Wales organisation, set off originally with funds from each of the 22 local authorities in its areas that it covered. But 1 or 2 local authorities didn't contribute to it, and Cardiff was one because it was paying us in the local CDA. And at that point in time, in the early 2000s, I was working for local government in the city, and I could see from the politics that our funding was going to be cut and transferred to the Wales Co-op Centre. Everyone wanted to be in with the bigger, glossier, chromium-plated beast rather than a little CDA that just worked in the city. So I transferred our staff and our funding to the Wales Co-op Centre. But we were also running a cooperative youth project at the time, and I don't know why I forgot to mention that to the Wales Co-op Centre. And so they were a little bit surprised when we carried on, but we had different funding for different initiatives, and we transferred the main cooperative development work to them. So all the paperwork was correct. They were never misled. I just didn't tell them what we were up to, but then they never told us what they were up to either. So it continues to operate as a youth community cooperative development organisation, funded almost entirely commercially. Its first contract was with the BBC to run a youth programme working with radio and with the early bits of the internet. How many people it employed? The base level really was one. There were occasions when there was nobody, and I was going into the office for 1 day a week, working as a barefoot development officer. But we got up to 3, and on one occasion we got up to 4 people. Like John Goodman's agency, we did have trouble with finding the right people, and particularly with finding people who lived and worked locally. We had a couple. One came from London and lived in South Wales, but not in the city, and another one who commuted backwards and forwards between North Wales. We did find it very difficult to find the right people with the right attitudes and also with experience. The details in terms of numbers, etc., success rates are contained in something that I always call the Cornforth report, written by Chris Cornforth from the Open University's Co-ops unit. He wrote lots of reports. I call it the Cornforth report because it's the only one that I'm involved with. And if I can send you a copy if you want. Okay. In it, all of the I think there are 5 agencies. They're all anonymised, but the one where it says Wales is the Cardiff and Vale, the one that I was involved in. And there it lays down success rates, numbers of staff, numbers of inquiries, etc. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for offering to share these documents with me. Now it's time to move on to the third part of the interview. And may I suggest, if you all agree, that maybe we start this round with Martin Stott, because he said he has to leave earlier than us, or than me at least. So this next part, the third part, was about the success of these CDAs in their work in supporting workers' co-ops. So the questions deal with the running cost of the CDAs in terms of payroll or premises, the number of worker co-ops that they helped set up, the number of jobs that they may have helped create, or the number of inquiries they receive on a monthly or yearly basis. So if you have anything any information to provide to answer these questions, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer these to some extent. Incidentally, the next thing that's happening for me has just been put back a bit, so I probably can stay to the end, depending on when the end is. I mean, the passage of 40 years means that a lot of this stuff is lost. I mean, you know, I can't really answer these in any detail. Like Kate, I have been able to dig out a small number of annual reports, this kind of thing. Sorry. Not sure if you can see it really, but I've got about 4 of them from the late 80s. A quick trawl beforehand suggests that the sort of annual turnover was in the general region of 35 to 40,000 a year, very roughly. It also suggests that the premises were heavily subsidised. I do recall that certainly in the early days, the CDA operated out of the offices of one of the co-ops, a language school, and I think it was just simply a spare room that they had, and I think essentially they charged like £500 or £700 a year, and that was all. And then slightly later on, they moved to premises run by the city council, which I think were aimed at, you know, kind of small businesses and people like co-op development agencies, though by that time I wasn't working for them, so I don't know exactly. How many co-ops did it help set up? How many jobs did it create? It's very hard to tell across this era. I mean, having a quick scan of these annual reports, which I haven't looked at for decades, I would say, you know, you're talking, I don't know, 4 or 5 a year, perhaps. But there was an awful lot of things that were sort of semi-co-ops, you know, kind of all sorts of kind of community development organizations and workspace outfits and projects to do with, you know, printmaking co-ops, which weren't worker co-ops, but were co-ops of people who came together with a common interest, or things to do with kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of employment initiatives for people with disabilities and that kind of thing, are quite a strong dimension of that kind of thing. And some of those lasted quite a long time. And one of them, called Oxford Whole Foods, still exists and is still run by people with, I think, learning disabilities. I mean, you know, I can walk down to my local co-op store on the bottom end of my street and pick up stuff that they've produced today, you know, so, you know, some aspects of it are quite positive. And things like the Printmakers Co-op are still going, and some of the famous whole food shops of early days like Uhuru still there. But, you know, it was largely focused in Oxford, even though it was an Oxfordshire organisation, and a lot of it was of its time. So, you know, they didn't last forever. How many inquiries did you receive each month here? No idea. Sorry, I can't really help on that. That's all on that question. That's a set of.
Can I just say something, François? I didn't know or couldn't remember what the report that Alex mentioned, the Cornforth report. I've just had a quick look, and that all of the Co-op Research Unit publications are downloadable as PDFs. And I think the one that you're referring to, Alex, I've just seen it, got quite a lot of the sort of statistics that you're after, François. Which as I say, I had never known about it. It's Chris Cornforth and Jenny Lewis who did it. That's the one, presumably, but they're all there online.
Just worth saying, Chris Cornforth was chair of Oxfordshire CDA's board for quite a while, certainly when I was, and he's a neighbour of mine who I see fairly regularly. So if there's anything you want to cross-question him about, I can follow that up quite easily, actually. I mean, he's quite a good friend. I did a report with him in the early days. Doubtless John can see that. I can't even remember the name of it. I very much doubt I've got a copy, but you know, you never know. I also did a report which was published by ICOM on the potential for the development of a worker co-op sector, which came out, I think, in about 1986. I could chase around and see if I can find it.
I'll put a link to that report in the chat. But anyway, do you already know about all this, François?
Yeah, I have already read a couple of articles by Chris Cornforth, yeah, and especially some about the survival rate of workers' co-ops and the role of local CDAs. So I would say I already have some statistics about the big picture, like on the national level, and they all come from, or most of them come from Chris Cornforth articles and papers. I haven't clicked the link, the one you sent, but I just check.
This website's got all the reports, and they were mostly not properly printed. They were they were pamphlets. They weren't duplicated, but they weren't properly printed books. All of the reports.
And I've also read some of the Cooperative Research Unit pamphlet as well. I think this one is, well, and monographs as they called it. Well, this one is number 7. I don't think I have read this one, but
I think
I've
that's
read.
what Alex was talking about.
Well, I will download it now. But I've read many case studies as well by the CRU from the early 80s. Thank you very much for that, John.
John, have you flagged up to François the worker co-op archive project that ran a few years ago with Andrew Bibby and
Yes,
so on?
yes, because François spoke to Andrew Bibby
Oh, right, that's fine.
at
Good.
an early stage in this work a few months ago,
Great.
about a year ago now.
Yeah, was it 2 years ago? Yeah,
Was it? Oh,
I think so. Yeah,
How
but
time-
thank you for asking, Martin. Yeah, always. So now, if we just go back to the outline of this session, does anyone else want to have a word to answer the questions of the second part about the running, the third part, sorry, about the success rate and the number of co-ops and jobs created by local CDAs?
Yeah, I'll come in there. The report that John has just circulated is a slightly different one, slightly later than the one I was referring to. Will clearly contain some of the same information because clearly there are overlaps. But the one I will share with you, I haven't got a link to it, but I've just got a copy. Is specifically looking at just, I think it was 5 individual agencies and detailed analysis of them. Approximate running cost of our local CDA payroll, premises, etc. We had just enough to cover payroll, but we never had any money for premises because we had what I think would actually worked out to be a very, very good arrangement, was a sort of under the counter arrangement in that we got premises for free. The local authority also funded a generic enterprise agency and insisted that both the council's economic development staff and the CDA staff would be housed inside their building, which was being funded through many many sources, but quite a lot coming from the local authority. So what we got was a free office, free heat and light, free phones, free use of a photocopier, everything like that. So all we had to pay for really was our insurance and staff wages. And typically the base level funding was enough to pay for one person. Again, going back to the report that I'll share with you, that's got the number of jobs created, a number of inquiries, etc. in it. So you'll see the figures there.
Yeah, would you like to have a word, David?
Yes, please. Can I just add a word to what Alex was actually saying earlier on about its constitution? In 1978, I remember having a conversation with Jack Brooks and John Reynolds at the Cooperative Retail Services offices in Moorland Road in Cardiff, and they wanted advice around constituting the CDA and how they would go about completing an urban aid application. If they'd have actually followed the advice that they were actually given, you wouldn't have had the problems that you described on the constitution front, because the constitution that they were provided with was the standard constitution that had been put together by Gwilym Priest Davies, a Labour peer eventually. And we used the IMP retail model rules. And those model rules were used in all the agencies that I was actually involved with. So Cardiff weren't able to benefit because they weren't able to understand, if you like, how they could best use existing sort of regulations. How successful was the CDA? Well, as I've explained previously, South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Centre, we were a development agency, but we were not a CDA. We could actually judge our success by our ability to initiate, prompt, support, and resource local initiatives, which then took on a life of their own. So if you look at, say, West Glamorgan's Common Ownership Development Agency's annual reports, there's no mention at all about South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Centre. I mean, that was great because we actually went in, did a job and came out, and then actually worked in other localities doing the same sort of ripple effect. The same could be said of Antia Tivy. The same approach in terms of constituting, using the urban aid programme was applied there. In each instance, there was 1.5 workers. So the reason why was that there was a limit on the amount of funding we could actually achieve successfully, I reckoned at the time, at around 10 or 12,000 pounds. And that involved a contribution of 25% from the local authority and the balance from central government. So if you like, that approach to stimulating local CDAs in various forms took place, as I've said, in West Glamorgan and here Tivy. It happened in a form with Rhondda Enterprise, and likewise with North Wales Employment Resource and Advice Centre. All these and also with Port Talbot CDA, all these started in a period around 77, talking with people and getting people organised locally, the application going in, being successful, agency starting in 1978, or it might be 1979, or even going into the end of that decade. And they were all employing 1.5 to 2 workers. But there are other examples where we directly went in and created a multi-stakeholder cooperative using IMP rules. And that was the instance there was Ferndale Home Improvement Service, which was the forerunner to the UK care and repair movement. And that agency operated from 78 till 2018. And that also had a ripple effect across different Rhondda valleys in terms of the, if you like, the original hub, giving, sort of spawning other like local developments within that locality with local like subcommittees. So although they weren't cooperative necessarily in form, the spirit there was cooperative, and there was a network of like local agencies employing local craftspeople who were training unemployed youngsters, who were providing at cost a service for people that had disrepair, typically people that were female owner-occupiers, very low incomes. And in fact, I can send you details of I think it went into the thousands, the number of people that were actually assisted by that project over that period of time. So it didn't appear as a, if you like, on the CDA map, but in terms of promoting and supporting mutuality, it was very successful. I think that I think brings it to a close.
Well, thank you, David.